One of the most fascinating things about our world is that something remarkable might be lying right beneath your feet without you even knowing it. That's what makes archaeology such an essential field of study. Over the centuries, we've uncovered objects that simply don't seem to belong, leaving scientists puzzled about how they got there. Join us as we explore 20 of the most mysterious recent archaeological finds and artifacts that scientists still can't explain. Number 20. French Sundial in Indiana. One of the reasons that these finds can sometimes be so mysterious and weird is that the location where they're found doesn't match up with the location of where the item is made. For example, in 1860, a doctor was doing some plowing in a field in Indiana, and while plowing up that dirt, he found a pocket sundial. That wouldn't have been such an odd thing if the dial had not come from France. For the record, the pocket sundial was not a recent invention in the 1800s. They've actually been around since the 1600s and were used by many different cultures. Even back then, people wanted to know what time it was as soon as possible. The French were indeed one of the makers of this watch, and that leads to one of the mysteries around the watch being revealed. In the days of the colonies, they imported such things instead of making them themselves, but it still doesn't solve how the sundial got to a field in Indiana. Or does it? Do recall that while the English had the colonies on the eastern coast of the United States, other nations had a hold on other parts of what would become the United States and Canada. The French had a very large influence in Canada and the middle section of the United States, which included Indiana. The French ceded the territory to the British in 1763, at the end of the French and Indian War, but British settlers were excluded from the area. The area would eventually be sold to the United States, which we used to great effect during the Manifest Destiny period. As a result, a French relic like a pocket sundial could have very easily been left there in the dirt. Number 19. The Antikythera Mechanism. The device that you're watching this video on is a highly complicated piece of digital machinery. It's sophisticated, and it probably took many years to come together. Computers, phones, and whatnot used to be much larger and specific in how they worked, but now they are leagues ahead of where they were before, much smaller and portable. But what if I told you that a computer existed in the time of the ancient Greeks, over 2,000 years ago? Well, you'd probably say that would be impossible, and to an extent, you'd be correct. A digital computer did not exist back then, but an analog one certainly did. It was found in 1901 and is known as the Antikythera Mechanism. The device was discovered on a shipwreck near the island it was named after. The mechanism was capable of performing different calculations, and it could even help track the motions of the sun, the moon, and 5 of the planets. It could even tell when athletic competitions like the Olympics were set to take place. Considering the time period in which it was active, it's incredible that the Greeks, or anyone else for that matter, were able to make it. That's just one of the biggest mysteries of the device. No one knows who made it or how they were able to get it to work as they wanted. To have made this device, a person or persons would have needed expert knowledge in many fields. Another curious element here is that the device is one of a kind. No other entities like it have ever been found. Many are trying to understand the mysteries of the Antikythera Mechanism, and we wish them luck in their journey because it would be really nice to get some answers that many are seeking. Number 18. Sea of Galilee Structure. Back in 2013, a stone structure was discovered in the Sea of Galilee. To an extent, that would not be so odd, but when you get into the details of the thing, the truth about how strange it is begins to come out. The mysterious structure is cone-shaped, made of unhewn basalt cobbles and boulders, and weighs an estimated 60,000 tons. For context, there are modern ships in our world today that are not even that heavy, yet a stone structure was able to be built and then somehow sunk with that weight. To give you some more perspective, the thing is 32 feet high and has a diameter of 230 feet, and Stonehenge isn't even that big. Researchers have said that the structure resembles something that was used in other cultures as burial sites and markers, but it's unclear if that was the case with the structure. Plus, why would such an entity even be that big? One of the ironies of the situation is that they found it by accident when they were doing some sonar surveys in the sea. As for how the thing got underwater, that's actually easy to explain. Based on all of the signs that they found, the structure was man-made and built upon land. Then over time, the Sea of Galilee rose and eventually consumed the structure. So at the very least, we know how it got down there, but whether we'll ever figure out what it was in the first place is up for debate. The years since then have been full of more research and excavations of the site to try and unearth more details, and as a result, we might have more information now than we did before. Yet there doesn't seem to be definitive proof of what the structure was or was not. Number 17. Tomb of the Emperor. When you think about the most famous tombs of the world, one of the things that is unquestionable is, will we go inside it? We went inside King Tut's tomb, and if we ever find Cleopatra's tomb, we'll definitely go in there. Yet there is one tomb that's been discovered that remains undisturbed. That would be the tomb of China's first emperor. He's easily one of the most important figures in China's history, as he was the one who conquered the 6 warring states of the nation and brought them together to create China as a unified nation. His tomb was under a hill in China, and we know for a fact that it was his burial place. The people who put him there clearly wanted to keep him safe, as they put a poisonous moat around it. Furthermore, when he died, he was buried in the most opulent tomb complex ever constructed in the country, a sprawling, city-sized collection of underground caverns containing everything the emperor would need for the afterlife. In Chinese culture, it was believed that items you were buried with were transferred over to the afterlife, and they even believed that people could cross over with you. That's why the legendary terracotta army was constructed and placed around the tomb of the emperor. They felt that he needed an army of protectors for when he crossed over. So why has the tomb not been opened yet? Well, it's a twofold reason. The first is that the Chinese government has the final decision on whether or not that happened. The second reason is that many are concerned for the preservation of the tomb itself. If something goes wrong, then a precious and priceless piece of history could be destroyed, and nobody wants that. We'll never know if we'll see inside the tomb, but when it's opened, it will be a monumental event. Number 16. Moai statues. Now, if you were to head to Easter Island, aka Rapa Nui, you're going to be greeted by some giant stone statues. These heads are one of the most striking visuals you'll find on the island, and they are one of the island's most major mysteries. For the longest time, people didn't know why they were made so big, or even why they were specifically put where they are. Many felt that they had a ritualistic purpose, while others thought that it could be astronomical in nature. There was no proof either way about what was or was not the reason. However, after a while, a team discovered another purpose for those statues, to be water markers. You see, there are only specific freshwater spots on the island that you can drink from, so someone realized that the stone statues represented where the fresh water was. Sure enough, if you look at where the statues are, there's a deposit of fresh water nearby. The team members said that they found it every time, and it was ridiculously predictable. While that may not be definitive proof, it's a bit hard to refute when they have so many pieces of evidence literally in the ground. Now it's time for today's topic. In a hidden chamber beneath the ruins of an ancient Aztec temple in Mexico, archaeologists uncovered a chilling discovery, an intricately carved artifact known as the Aztec death whistle. Alongside it were various ceremonial items, hinting at the whistle's role in Aztec rituals, likely used to invoke fear or communicate with spirits. One of the archaeologists, deeply intrigued by the artifact's grotesque design, became fascinated by the legends surrounding its infamous sound, a sound so terrifying it was said to mimic the cries of the dead. Unable to resist, he decided to blow into the whistle, curious to experience its effect firsthand. But as soon as he did, a piercing, high-pitched shriek filled the chamber, so intense it echoed through the stone walls like a chorus of tortured souls. The noise was unbearable, and in those few seconds, he felt an intense pain in his ears. When the sound faded, he was left disoriented, his hearing severely damaged. The incident served as a stark reminder of the terrifying power these artifacts hold. What began as a moment of curiosity quickly turned into a chilling encounter, revealing why the Aztecs had wielded such a deadly instrument with reverence and caution. Number 15. Stonehenge. You probably could have easily guessed that this was going to end up on the list. Stonehenge remains one of the biggest mysteries of the world today. A giant structure in Salisbury Plain, Wiltshire, England, it's been a source of many mysteries and conspiracy theories throughout the ages. The biggest reason that it's a mystery is that no one really knows what it's there for. There's been much debate and many theories that have tried to understand it all, but with little luck. There are massive stones that are stacked or buried in a very specific way. However, its purpose has never been fully clear. The most prominent theory is that the structure is used as a kind of calendar. That's why everything is so perfectly placed to line up with the sun and the stars above. Others think that it may have been ritualistic in nature. Another problem is the stones. The stones are huge, as mentioned, and they weigh many tons. Yet the people of ancient times were able to drag them to the spot that they're on and somehow hoist them up to either stand up firm or be stacked on another set of rocks. One mystery that was solved was the location of the rocks in terms of their origin point. However, that raised even more mysteries, as it's said to have been found over 15 miles away from the spot. Who would go so far to get stones to make a structure? Nobody knows, and that's why the mystery endures. Number 14. The Sheib Wall. Look around any ancient civilization enough, and you're going to find ones that love walls. They loved to make walls and weren't afraid to use them as big or as long as possible. In the nation of Jordan, one wall in particular has gotten many people's eyes. That would be the Sheib. It's a wall that you can very easily see from the sky, and it goes 150 kilometers. What's more, it's also a short wall, so it's not one that you would use to defend yourself from an invader. However, there's a belief that the wall could have well been used to make a boundary between farmers and their lands, and what's more, It could have been used to ward off animals that may have roamed in or to stop nomads from breaching certain areas. Number 13. The Mystery of Sinkingsu. An established part of history that we can all understand is that civilizations rise and fall, and as a result, there are parts of them that get lost to time. For China, one of their biggest lost civilizations was that of Sinkingsu. This was one of the civilizations that rose up well before China became unified, and it was very prosperous as a place to live. Yet, it vanished off the map without any kind of warning. The common belief is that there was an earthquake that caused the people to move to another place, which led to the civilization decaying. Obviously, we cannot know that for sure, but we do know that it existed thanks to the artifacts that have been found. Number 12. The Nazca Lines. Continuing on with ancient structures that don't make any sense, we'll talk about the Nazca Lines. You have to go to Peru to see these, and they're best seen when you're in a plane above the ground. They're a series of geoglyphs that were made by the ancient Nazca people, and when you view them from on high, you'll see that the lines form a bunch of shapes that are quite impressive in size and detail. But that's the rub there. We can see their wonder because we have a plane. They had nothing of the sort when they were actually created. What's more, the lines that comprise these geoglyphs are perfect in their form and length. How were the ancient Nazca people able to create such things with precision, being unable to check their work without great difficulty? Well, it's a mystery that's puzzled many over the years and has found itself into many pieces of pop culture, including anime. While we don't know the answer, they've become a popular tourist attraction, and it's not hard to see why people would love to view them. Number 11. Hobbit in Asia. Easily one of the biggest mysteries that scientists have been trying to solve is that of whether or not there were races of giant hobbits roaming the earth at one point in time. You would think it would be pretty easy to confirm or deny such a thing, but you'd be wrong. There have been findings over the years that indicate that there could have been people of grand sizes or short sizes roaming around. For example, a new book released in 2022 claimed that there was an island in what is now Indonesia where a race of hobbits once resided. They were called that by the book due to how they were only 3 feet in height, well below the average height of a human in modern times. To prove this, the book cited multiple sites found on the island that contained bones many years apart which contained hobbit bones. If you can sense a but coming, well, it's because you're smart. There are some who say that the claim is fake and that the bones are not what you think they are. That's why you never trust someone at their word unless they can back it up on matters like this. Number 10. The Moa Claw. One of the biggest questions that we repeatedly find ourselves questioning in our world is whether the ancient creatures of the past are still dead or somehow still roam the earth. The reason we keep having to ask these questions is that there are living fossils that exist in our world today, like with the coelacanth. But in terms of land animals, the one that many feel is alive today somehow is the moa. The reason for this is that 30+ years ago, a group of people were traveling through Mount Owen in New Zealand when they came across a claw of an animal that they didn't recognize. That claw was later determined to be from a moa, a giant 9-foot-tall bird that used to wander around what is now New Zealand. The preservation of the claw was so remarkable that it still had skin and muscle tissue, looking eerily fresh for a creature believed to be extinct for centuries. This discovery sparked intense curiosity, with some speculating that perhaps a small population of moas might have survived undetected in New Zealand's dense, remote forest. Cryptozoologists and researchers alike have searched for signs, but no concrete evidence has been found to confirm the bird's continued existence. Interestingly, the moa's claw is now displayed in a museum, captivating visitors and fueling ongoing debates about ancient creatures that might still be hiding in unexplored parts of the world. The moa's story remains a tantalizing example of how the natural world sometimes defies our understanding, keeping ancient mysteries alive. It's believed to have been hunted down by the Maori people, and yet a claw of one would be found and was not fossilized. Number 9. Gobekli Tepe. Sometimes, the big mystery is not necessarily the structure that's built, but who built it in the first place. Gobekli Tepe is famous because it's said to be the world's oldest temple. But when you dive into who might have built the structure, that's where things get complicated. Based on the time period and the elements that were found around Gobekli Tepe, the structure was said to have been made by hunter-gatherer communities. That doesn't sound odd at first, except that during that time, these groups were incredibly small. The pillars and intricate carvings depict animals and symbols, suggesting that these ancient builders had a rich spiritual or symbolic culture. Given the size and sophistication of the site, archaeologists have questioned whether these people had far more advanced social and organizational skills than previously believed. Some even think the construction of Gobekli Tepe could have been a catalyst for the shift from nomadic lifestyles to settled communities. The sheer amount of labor required would have demanded cooperation and coordination, hinting at a level of social complexity that predates agriculture. This discovery has led some to reconsider the timeline of human civilization, suggesting that spiritual or religious practices might have been a primary driver for building complex societies. Some believe that it's proof of when groups of people came together to make communities and thus form larger societies. But obviously, that's a bit hard to prove, and so the mystery simply continues. Number 8. The Voynich Manuscript. We'll transition from a curious mystery to one that's indecipherable. The Voynich Manuscript is a mystery because no one really knows what it was, what it all means, or who even made it. Think about it like this. The Voynich Manuscript is a codex, meaning that it was written and, in this case, illustrated by someone who was trying to convey something. Typically, codices like these have a key that can help them be deciphered and thus explained, but not with this one. Some of the manuscript's pages depict bizarre plants that don't resemble any known species, as well as astrological charts that don't match any familiar constellations. Linguists have analyzed the text using various cryptographic techniques, yet it defies translation, leaving them baffled about whether it's an actual language or simply an elaborate hoax. Even computer algorithms have attempted to find patterns in the text, but none have yielded a clear answer. Some theorize that it could be an elaborate medieval experiment, a coded alchemical text, or even an entirely fictional language. Despite the mystery, the manuscript has drawn the attention of historians, code breakers, and curious minds alike, each hoping to unlock its secrets someday. As a result, people have spent years trying to figure out what it all means, and we're no closer to figuring out now than we were then. It doesn't help that the illustrations are very odd, to put it in a nice way. It might be better if we just don't figure this one out at all. Number 7. The Copper Scroll. Despite what it may sound like, it was not uncommon at one time for things to be written down on metals so that they could last longer compared to paper. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, which were actual religious artifacts, there was one that stood out amongst them, that being the Copper Scroll. It was exactly what it sounds like, a scroll that was written on copper with various information on it. And that's where things get both mysterious and interesting. Unlike the rest of the scrolls, which were a chronicle of the Christian Bible, the Copper Scroll was a treasure map. The scroll lists vast quantities of gold and silver, suggesting that whoever buried these treasures was immensely wealthy or guarding resources for a larger group. Interestingly, some scholars believe the treasure could be linked to the Second Temple in Jerusalem, hidden away to protect it from invading forces. The descriptions of the locations are cryptic, often referring to landmarks or measurements that no longer exist or are too vague to trace. Researchers have tried to decode the exact sites mentioned, but without more detailed instructions, the true meaning of these locations remains elusive. This mysterious scroll has fueled countless expeditions, as many still hope to locate the legendary riches it describes. There were over 60 locations pointed out on the scroll that were said to have hidden treasure of some kind. But the problem with it is that the map leaves something to be desired, and thus it's impossible to know where the treasure is said to have been buried. Number 6. The Stone Spheres. The next one is a classic, and people have been trying to find an answer for it for almost a century. Back in the 1930s, a company was looking around Costa Rica for a place to settle a new plantation for their business. They went through the jungles of the nation and would soon find themselves looking at an odd stone sphere. But then they found another, and then they just kept popping up all over the place. Another oddity that was noticed by the team was the variety of them in terms of size. Some of these spheres were small and only a few inches across, but then they would find one that was multiple feet in diameter and one that even weighed 16 tons. They were all similar in shape, and by that, I mean that they were perfectly rounded spheres. Over the course of the next few years, it would be discovered that there were about 300 of these stones. That's a whole lot of rocks, and it would later be concluded that whoever made these did them by hand. Now, I'll pause there and ask the obvious question. Why would anyone take so much time to make 300 smooth and near-perfectly circular spheres? That's the mystery that many have been trying to figure out, because by all accounts, it just doesn't make any sense. Scientists think that it was done by ancient people who were indigenous to the valley in Costa Rica in which they were found. It does solve one mystery, but it still leaves plenty to be explained, not the least of which is why these people felt the need to make them. It also needs to be noted that these spheres weren't all in one place or arranged in a certain way. They were actually scattered all about the nation. Clearly, the people had a reason to make such a variety of stones, but it's debatable whether we'll ever learn their true purpose. Number 5. The Mysteries of King Tut's Tomb. King Tut's tomb is easily one of the most important relics ever found in archaeological history. It was the find that helped to jumpstart the desire to learn more about Egyptian history and the history of the world. And there was that curse that led everyone to think that people were dying because they found the tomb, but I'm not going to talk about that. The fact is, despite the tomb being found and studied, there are still many facts about King Tut that we don't know, and the mysteries around his death are still debated to this day. Some of the other mysteries include: who were his parents? Who was the pharaoh before him? Who was the one who ruled afterwards? And finally, was the tomb that Tut was buried in actually meant for him? These may seem like small questions, but they can have a big impact on the history that we know and don't know for this historical figure. Number 4. The Shroud of Turin. Sticking with the notion of controversial artifacts, we'll talk about the Shroud of Turin. This religious artifact is controversial for multiple reasons. The shroud is said to be the cloth that was wrapped around the face of Jesus Christ of Nazareth after he was crucified and then buried. It was even said that there's the imprint of a face on the cloth, so you can see why so many people would be interested in such a thing if it was real. Keywords being if it was real, because there have been many claims about why it's not or even not close to being real. First off, the cloth just magically showed up many years after Christ was said to have been slain. The first recordings of it would be in the 1350s, which was a long period after the crucifixion. What's more, it was later tested and found to have materials within it that would not have been around in the time of Christ. The problem is that despite it being debunked by reputable sources, there are some who still believe in it and treat it as a religious artifact. Number 3. Noah's Ark. In the Christian faith, Noah was a man who was chosen by God to create an ark that would carry a few humans and 2 of each creature. The ark would withstand a flood that would reshape the world and purge it from the sin that had consumed it. After the event, a dove was presented to Noah as a symbol that God would never do such a thing again. The ark in question would have had to have been massive to hold all of those animals, so the mystery is what happened to it. Various expeditions have been launched, particularly around Mount Ararat in Turkey, where some believe the ark came to rest after the floodwaters receded. Satellite images have shown curious formations that sparked interest, leading some researchers to suggest that remnants of the ark might be buried under ice and rock. Many historians argue that even if the ark once existed, it would likely have deteriorated over time, especially given the wood and materials available in ancient times. A handful of explorers have claimed to find wooden structures high on Mount Ararat, but no definitive proof has emerged to confirm the ark's existence. Whether it's a lost relic or merely a story, the search for Noah's Ark remains a fascinating quest blending faith, history, and mystery. Based on legends and where things were said to have reset, people have a general idea of where to look, but no true trace of the ark has ever been found. Still though, some say that it's unlikely to be found, given the years that have passed, and yet people still search for it even to this day. Number 2. The Maya. If there was a civilization that has left the biggest question mark on history, it would arguably be the Maya. At one point in time, they were the biggest civilization on the planet and had made their mark in Central America and beyond, and we're still finding relics from them today. They were a highly advanced civilization that had art, science, calendars, a deep religious structure, and massive cities. The mystery that surrounds them has to do with how they just disappeared. Archaeologists have suggested various theories, including prolonged droughts, which could have made agriculture nearly impossible and driven people to abandon their cities. Another theory points to internal conflicts and warfare, possibly causing cities to fall into ruin as resources dwindled. Evidence of sudden climate shifts has also been found, which may have destabilized their society by disrupting water sources essential to their survival. Disease outbreaks are another possibility, as the spread of unknown illnesses could have devastated large populations. Despite these theories, none fully explain the abrupt disappearance of a civilization so advanced and organized. The civilization went from being on top of the world to being wiped off the map. People were gone, and yet buildings and artifacts remained. To this day, people still don't know where they went, and we likely may never find out the full truth. Number 1. Giant circles. Now, as we've shown you throughout the video, there are plenty of things that you can find when you're in the sky looking down. Archaeologists in Jordan have taken high-resolution aerial images of 11 ancient big circles, and all but one of them are 1,312 feet in diameter. These circles are also really close to each other, so it would be really odd if they were all just randomly placed there. Adding to the mystery, these circles are constructed with a precision that suggests careful planning and possibly even a symbolic or ritualistic purpose. Some researchers have proposed that the circles could have been used as gathering places or markers for travelers in the ancient world, guiding them across vast, barren landscapes. Others speculate that the circles might have held astronomical significance, aligning with certain celestial events that were important to early cultures. Interestingly, no signs of walls or additional structures have been found around these circles, suggesting they weren't used as traditional settlements or fortifications. The uniformity and symmetry of the circles continue to perplex archaeologists, as no similar structures have been found in nearby regions. As for when they were made, it's believed to have been over 2,000 years ago, but the purpose of them remains unclear. They were very large, though, and were so perfectly constructed that it wouldn't make much sense for them to be randomly created. So why did the people of Jordan need such big circles to be made? You tell me. That's a wrap from the world of archaeological digs and their incredible discoveries. Were you amazed by some of the finds made by teams and everyday people? Which ones did you find the most puzzling? And are there any others you think should have made the list? Let me know in the comments below. Check out the other cool videos on the screen, and I'll see you next time.